Hey everyone, it's Raz from the Semi-Retired Samurai. I hope you're doing well wherever you are in the world. And today I want to talk to you about what losing everything taught me later in life. Now, I don't know if you have lost a business or suffered financially or know somebody close to you who has lost everything financially or lost a loved one. And there's lots of lessons that I gained from seeing this happen in my life personally. And one of the things that happened was when I was a child, my father had lost his business. And that experience really scarred me for life. I didn't know how much it really affected me till later on. And I didn't realize for many years that this was affecting me negatively. So I remember as a child when my parents would argue on a daily basis over finances. I still remember as a kid lying in bed and just waiting because I couldn't fall asleep, just waiting for my father to come home at 1 a.m. in the morning after he finished his shift at the restaurant, and my mother waiting for him to discuss the finances. And it always led into a big argument where they argued till 4, 5 in the morning, and I'd still be awake and maybe get a couple hours of sleep before I went to school. And this happened on a daily basis. So there was this constant tension in the household all the time, and it just felt like I couldn't get away from it. And unfortunately, this happened for many years. And then one day, I was listening outside of the house. I was sitting in the driveway playing some, I think it was some basketball or something like that. And I overheard my parents talking about the finances in our house. And I was called into the home, and my aunt sat me down and she said, I don't want you to blame your father. This happens to a lot of people, and things are going to get really tight for a while. And she said that my father was going to declare bankruptcy. And for me, I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that it was bad because I was just 9 years old at the time. But what followed afterwards was a series of things that happened, and we had the heat and gas shut off at our house multiple times. And I remember my mom just trying to make meals for us and trying to save money and opening up the fridge door, and there was hardly any food in there. I remember my mom making dishes, and we'd eat the same thing over and over again for a week. She would choose the cheapest meats, and sometimes she would go without having meat. And I remember her crying one time when I was a kid. She made us spaghetti with meat sauce, and she didn't have any meat on her plate, and all she ate was noodles in some olive oil. And that was her meal for the night. And I distinctly remember her sitting across the table from me, and she was crying and weeping, and her tears was hitting the noodles. And I just felt so helpless and horrible at that time. And I remember looking across the table, and I said, Mom, would you like my spaghetti? And she just quietly nodded her head, said, shook her head, said, no, it's okay. You go ahead and eat. And so as the years got by, and as I became an adult, I started to realize how much time we lost, how much time we didn't have as a family because we were always working all the time. And I can become very bitter at the whole experience, and I was for for many years. And I slowly start to realize that I was just holding myself back, trying to make sense of the past. And I also was blaming my parents for all the bad things that happened as a kid. And it started to hurt me more than anything because it prevented me from excelling. It prevented me from moving forward to reach my potential. So I learned that even though I was later on financially stable, I had a really hard time accepting that I was safe. And for many years, I couldn't relax. Even when I went on vacation, I was always tense because I always felt like I should be working. Because when you don't have money and you develop this scarcity mindset and you always feel like it can be taken away from you at any minute, and you never want to go back to that feeling, the feeling of not having enough, the feeling of not measuring up. So it took me years later, but I finally, probably the last 4 years, I gave myself permission to enjoy my life and to be less uptight. And it's really changed my outlook on everything, on what is important, and to not dwell on the past, because the past is the past and there's nothing we can do to change it. But I can always change the course for now and change the course and how it shapes the future and the way I look at it. So it's really lifted a lot of stress off my shoulders. And our first time I felt like, I was actually living, because I start to look back on all the things that I missed as a child. The camping trips that my friends would go on that I didn't get to go, playing sports, having my parents show up at my sporting events. And I learned to realize that time is very limited and that we're here to enjoy the now and not live in the past, because we can never get those years back, no matter how much money we make. The other thing that I learned was there's always a positive lesson to learn from every tragedy. And it shaped me to be a lot more cautious as an adult, because I always told myself I didn't want to be like my parents. I didn't want to live like my parents. And it made me really hyper responsible and gave me a very, very strong drive to succeed. And I became more self-aware of these, self-aware of any decisions I make, how it affects myself, but most importantly, how it affects the people around me. So my wife and things like that, because I always thought that growing up that the decision making was quite reckless, and it affected the whole family and affected the family for many years. And I was dead set on not letting that happen again. The other thing I learned was when my dad lost his business, is I said to myself, oh, I'm not going to let that happen again. And I'll never do that in my adult life. So when I built my first business into a success, it was good for about 10 years. And then things start to slow down. Maybe I didn't do the things that needed to be done to be successful. And I wasn't equipped to grow the business in a way that it should have. And I ended up having to close the business after 10 years. And what hurt more was not the financial loss, but the loss of my identity and trying to find myself and figure out like what I was going to do next. Was I going to go back to work? Was I going to start a new business? And I didn't know what to start because I was quite lost. And I started to self-reflect on what skills am I missing? Was I lucky? Was I lucky the first time I started my business? Maybe I wasn't as good as a business person as I thought I was. So I started to look at all these things and think about, okay, what can I do to improve myself today? Because obviously the first time wasn't good enough. So I started to read books on successful people. I started to better myself in marketing. I started to study social media, how to build websites. And most importantly, I start to really humble myself, because when you start to get initial success, you think that you know everything. And I realized I didn't know that much. So I started to tap into mentors. I started to ask people who were more knowledgeable than me in the area of business. And I learned so much from them. And from that, I was able to make a comeback in my second business. And this really helped me out so much, because I became more knowledgeable. I became more knowledgeable in the martial arts. I became a better teacher. I also delved into public speaking. I joined a public speaking group to improve my public speaking skills, because I wasn't a very good speaker before. I was actually quite shy, and I was worried about what other people would think when I got up on stage and spoke. And so I had to get over that initial fear. And through practice and through a supportive environment, I was able to become a very good public speaker, and eventually start getting paid to do motivational speaking. So that gave me a lot of confidence to move forward. So the martial arts, I was able to take those lessons from the martial arts and apply everything I learned to business. And within 3 years, I was back on my feet. And this time I came prepared, and I promised myself that I wasn't going to fail this time, and I was going to make it a sustainable success for the long term. So I want to leave this message with you, and to know that if you're watching this today, if you've lost your business, or maybe lost something financially, or maybe lost a loved one, that understand that it's gonna hurt a while. But take time to reflect and be brutally honest with yourself on what your limitations are, and ask yourself, what can I do better? How can I improve to ensure that this does not happen again? And there's a saying in the martial arts that there is no such thing as losing, just learning. And one of the lessons I learned was not to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. I know that it seems like common sense, but I think a lot of us just keep going through life and accepting that this is the way it is, and this is the way it's always been, so it's going to continue on this path. And I'm a prime example of that. Doesn't always have to be the way. So I hope that story resonates with you if you're going through the same challenges as I did, and inspires you to better your life. And if you like this video, and if you found it helpful, please like and subscribe, and feel free to check out my next video. All right, take care. I'll see you next time.